used to work. Sorry. It's okay.
Please charge your coffee and grab a seat as we get started here with our next speakers. Also want to recognize that Meade Treadwell has joined us up on the podium. So a couple of questions came up over the break that our next speaker, I asked Captain Smith, Scott Smith from the Coast Guard, to address in his presentation. One of them was some comments about CMTS and where that was going, marine spatial planning, which again falls in the middle of Scott's portfolio by happenstance. And so Scott's going to talk about those two issues. If any other questions come up in this morning, please write them down. And when we're done with our speakers and right before Meade comes up to wrap up, we'll bounce some more questions back and forth. So please keep your comments and write them down, and let's keep this interactive at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Captain Scott Smith from the Coast Guard Navigation Systems. Scott?
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate the introduction. President Grimson, really enjoyed the comments last night, and to the organizers, I'm happy to be here representing the Coast Guard from a headquarters perspective. I think a lot of things that I have to say, Captain Cashin probably alluded to, so I'm going to try hopefully go in a little bit different direction, but my understanding of the couple questions from the last session were of the CMTS and the Arctic study I think they did that actually they put out early this spring, which was a 10-year look at Arctic and Arctic traffic. I'm familiar with the study. The CMTS, for those folks that aren't familiar with it, is a presidential-led or cabinet-led Committee on Marine Transportation at the headquarters at the Washington, D.C. level. It is a secretary and undersecretary driven model. There are 4 agencies that are lead agencies between DOD, DHS, DOT, and Commerce. They share the chair of that committee, and there are about 27 other agencies that are in D.C. that are on that committee. They have interagency action teams. One of those is an Arctic interagency action team. They have a maritime data interagency action team. They have a future navigation interagency action team, and it's basically pulling that together the agencies within at the headquarters level to ensure that their efforts are complementary, not duplicative, and to move forward. The report that I'm alluding to got pushed out, I think this February. I've perused it. I have not read it in full. It is a lot of it is what you'll see in other reports trying to project traffic in the Arctic in the future out to 10 years. So it's difficult to do that. There's a lot of postulating in that report. One of the main reasons, I think they were asked to do it back in 2009, 2010, but it also meets a requirement for the National Strategy in Arctic region from the President. So it's online, it's available if you want to take a look at it. I probably shouldn't comment on the validity of their assumptions in the report. I'll let you judge that for yourself. Any questions on that report or CMTS before I go on with my presentation? Sure, did I answer your question at all, or?
I don't have a mic, but my question is, speak to procedurally what will happen in this cabinet level function.
So procedurally what will happen is the report was provided by the CMTS to all the other agencies and opened out in the public. The other agencies should use that report as a backbone to facilitate other requirements within the national strategy for the Arctic region to move forward in doing all manner of things that are in that national strategy and the implementation plan there.
So I guess what I'm really trying to say is if the secretary or deputy or undersecretary were here, what would they say about where that stands and what it will cause to happen next? And what will be the time frame?
Well, it's a 10-year study. I can speak to, if you look at the implementation plan for the National Strategy for the Arctic Region, signed by the President, the implementation plan signed by the President, there are very specific timeframes for actions within that implementation plan. I would say the report that was put out by the CMTS would be used as a backbone for those implementation requirements in that implementation plan, and they'll move forward from there. So there are different timelines for different actions within that implementation plan. So I'm from headquarters. Hopefully, I'm here to provide a little assistance. My current job is the Navigation Systems Office Chief. Prior to that, over the last 2 years, I was Deputy Director for Marine Transportation Systems Management at headquarters. So underneath that portfolio fell everything from domestic and polar ice breaking to navigation systems, which means all the aids of navigation, VTS, all the marine spatial planning. I don't know what the marine spatial planning question is, but hopefully I'll answer some of that within my talk this morning. And amongst other things, Great Lakes Pilot is some of the things that really don't pertain to folks up here. Let's see if I can do this here. All right, so the Coast Guard's Arctic strategy was signed back in May of 2013 and with the goal to ensure safe and secure and environmentally responsible marine activity in the Arctic. The Coast Guard's 3 strategic objectives in the region are improving awareness, modernizing governance, and broadening partnerships in order to ensure the safe, secure, and environmentally responsible maritime activity within the Arctic. The Coast Guard strategies and strategic objectives align with the national strategy for the Arctic region, as well as the implementation plan. The implementation plan centers around really these 13 initiatives. For those of you who have heard most Coast Guard folks talk before, you've probably heard iterations of talks concerning most or not of all of the other 12 items. I'm going to talk about promotion of waterways management. Okay, that's my bailiwick, and I think that's an important piece to understanding the governance and actually the tactical stuff that we're doing on the waterway to help improve maritime situational awareness and the governance of the waterways. With increased human activity in an opening ocean, the basic tenets of safe and effective navigational environment must continually be updated. I would like to briefly discuss some of those areas and how we are partnering with other federal agencies and private stakeholders to try to meet those needs in the Arctic and hopefully begin to address some of Mrs. Ulmer's questions of last night. Safe navigation starts with a solid hydrographic information. There is a significant need for accurate and current hydrographic information in our Arctic waters. The federal agencies that are responsible for the information have a daunting task ahead of them, and the Coast Guard is supporting that effort. NOAA has 4 hydrographic survey vessels, 2 of which are currently devoted to surveying Arctic waters. NOAA ships Fairweather and Rainier are collecting bathymetric data and searching for seamounts and other underwater hazards of navigation. These ships are working in partnership with the Coast Guard to map the proposed marine corridor into the Arctic via the Bering Strait. NOAA and the Coast Guard will use depth data to ascertain safety of this proposed maritime transportation corridor. The Office of Coast Survey is planning a total of 16 transits for this project. Overall, the project intends to collect about 12,000 linear nautical miles of data along this corridor. Although Coast Guard Cutter Healy's primary mission is not focused on hydrography for charting purposes, the Healy will coordinate with NOAA to acquire depth measurements and track lines while transiting in other areas of our Arctic, thus putting more data into the hands of NOAA. Coast Guard operates on a layered system for looking at navigational risk in the waterway. PARS, which Captain Cashin alluded to earlier, PASA, and WAMS. The Ports and Waterway Safety Act authorizes the Secretary to designate necessary fairways and traffic separation schemes to provide safe access for vessels proceeding to and from U.S. ports. The Act also requires the Coast Guard to conduct a study of potential traffic densities and assess the need for safe access routes for vessels. These studies are referred to as PARs, and I'm sure all aware, as Captain Cashin alluded to, that one's being conducted right now from UNIMAC Pass up through the Bering Straits. Ports and Waterways Safety Assessment, or PASA, is a formal workshop which brings together local experts to analyze the risk of a particular port. Earlier this week, I just came from LALB, where we conducted a PASA down there, a PASA workshop. It's a 2-day formal workshop where the participants go through and take a look at the base risk of that port, of that area, based on traffic density, type of vessels, the condition of those vessels, everything from the large ocean-going vessels going into LALB to kite surfers to kayakers, just about everything that uses the waterway. Talks about channel dimensions, talks about waterway conditions, talks about sea state, talks about the weather. So it looks at all those types of things when it looks at risk, and then looks at the impacts if one of those things would happen, to draw a baseline, a risk assessment of that waterway. Then they look at what current risk control options are currently in place, VTS, the pilotage in the area, and how that reduces the risk, to come up with a risk number for then. Then the next thing they do, and the last thing they do, is look at what other risk control options can they put in place to address changes or increase in traffic or other issues that, since the last PASA, has increased the risk in that port. We did one in Chicago, and it looked at human-powered craft in the Chicago Ship Canal. Something that's changed, something that's new, but caused a lot of headaches for the towing community. So we brought everybody together. This is not really Coast Guard led, although we contract out for facilitation of the workshop, is led by the local waterway users. And so they have the best understanding of what the issues are and the impacts are, and what the best resolution would be. Finally, a waterway analysis and management study is a very ATON-centric, AIDS navigation-centric study to ensure the current system in place is adequate. Waterways analysis management studies have been completed up in the Arctic. It assists for industry and local users to show how the current system is meeting the requirements. As activity increases, infrastructure develops, we need to continue to ensure the AIDS navigation system that is in place meets the requirements to reduce the risk associated with sailing in these environments. The stand-up of the Arctic Waterway Safety Committee that Captain Cashin alluded to is extremely important in both the PASAs and the WAMS process. Across the country, harbor safety committees play a critical role during both of these events. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit this morning about what we call the Future Navigation Initiative. Future Navigation Initiative looks to address two things: the delivery of MSI, which is marine safety information, and how we're marking our waterways and how we're looking at our waterways from an ATON perspective, both physical and electronic. The current way of voyage is planned, requires a mariner to seek ethical marine information for the trip. Different government agencies provide navigational information in different ways, not always well coordinated with each other. Examples to the left up here show different methodologies, sources of online PDF data from the Coast Guard, Corps of Engineers, and NOAA. Mariner has to go through at least 3 different places to get information they need to update their charts, to get notices to mariners, safety concerns for their voyage. Once they get all that information, they need to sift through all the pages. For instance, in D8, their normal locals to mariner on a weekly basis is about 64 pages. And if you're only doing a small 15-mile, 20-mile transit, you've got to sift through 64 pages to get your pertinent information. It's an old, antiquated system that we want to update. Through a joint effort with NOAA and the Corps of Engineers, with our shared waterway partners, we've embarked on an effort to coordinate various government provided navigation information that can be assessed and delivered electronically in a variety of formats to meet the end user needs. This is referred to as Enhanced Marine Safety Information, or EMSI. Eventually, EMSI will be available as a web service accessible via various devices, whether it's computer, smartphone, tablet, integrated into existing navigation and logistics systems, and transmitted via AIS to be displayed on vessels' navigation systems much more quickly and efficiently than can be done with the current information system and dissemination methods. The web-based system would allow the user to gather an MSI in two different ways. One is you can do a click and drag and open up a box that you see on the left-hand side here, and it'll give you all the marine safety information, all the local nose to mariner type information for that area. You'll also be able to do it through route planning. I want to go from point A to point B, and you place that route into the web-based system, and it'll give you all the pertinent marine safety information from those agencies along that route. You'll be able to pull that in and put it into your electronic system or print it out to use the old-fashioned way, and allow you to just pull the specific information that you need for your voyage. While the Mariner is underway, we'll be able to broadcast via AIS marine safety information, which you would normally have in a broadcast notice to mariners. So that time-critical information that you need on the bridge, whether it's a light that's extinguished, a wreck, you name it, that time-critical information that the mariner needs to improve their situational awareness, we're going to get to them as quick and as soon as possible through this method.